What's up, everybody? Welcome to Blade Talk. How's everybody doing? I see a lot of people in the room. Sorry for the wait. We were actually bullshitting off the air for a little bit. We were just trying to get organized, get our thoughts organized, all that stuff. How's everybody doing? Let me bring everybody into the room. We'll get started. We got Matthew JENSEN in the room. And, of course, good old SCAB. What's up, gentlemen?
Going on, man?
Hello. We got to change our title, SCAB. I think it's getting a little old, man. It's not even your channel name anymore. Why you don't think I'm being honest with you? I think we got to change the title.
I'm being honest. SCAB's gonna be honest tonight. Happy Memorial Day, Joe. Jesus Christ.
Happy Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day, everybody. Yes.
You need to change your name. That's why I went with an original.
You've only reached heights no one hasn't, but just change the shit.
All I'm saying is it's getting old, and I have to put in the work, and I got to change it. That's all I'm saying.
Between you and Donnie, why don't I just quit doing it and go to
TikTok?
TikTok?
Pun intended.
There it is.
I'm just saying it's old. It's got to be changed. That's all it is. What's up, everybody? What's up, Carl, Bird, Jerbs?
What's up, guys?
Garen, Jimbo, everybody in the room. How are you, everybody? How's everybody doing? Thanks for joining us.
My bad. Hey, real quick, two things. One, I feel like a dumbass, which is the story of my life. I've already been live one time, Joe, for like 8 minutes because I thought we were going on 7:30 like we do every damn time.
It only said 8 o'clock, though.
Well, I can't look at all that shit. I got stuff to do. So, to John, what's up, buddy? So, to everybody, I'm sorry about that. But my bad. Brother, are you in Atlanta? Quit talking about your editing. Are you in Atlanta for Blade Show? Y'all know Blade Show is this week. Matthew, good. I'm glad you're here, buddy. Thanks for joining us on this fine adventure.
Glad to be here.
I wanted to ask you, because I haven't watched it yet, so I'm not going to act like I did, like I normally do. You put out a video. Well, I don't know if I should mention it.
Go ahead. Mention it away.
The worst swords you've ever reviewed.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, the recent video I did was of the worst sword that I ever reviewed. And in the video, I note that I didn't want to do it. That some time ago, I bought a sword from a company called Alayubab. I bought it secondhand, as I do many of the swords that I end up with. It's a way to keep the hobby affordable. Anyway, it wasn't my cup of tea from the start, and I used it in a few videos as an example of a bad sword. The handle had had a sharp part of a quillion, so it basically jammed into your hand. I'd show you, but it's destroyed now. Couldn't. Well, anyway, it was bad because it was bad as an object. It wanted to hurt you when you held it. It didn't index well, and then when I went to go use it, it failed as a sword catastrophically, and it was built in such a way that they had to almost go out of their way to make it bad, it seems. So I like it. It seems like there's effort and there's complexity to the way it was built, but I'm not a sword builder. I don't make them, but it seems like there were a lot of opportunities to make the sword better that were intentionally subverted, and the result was something that was not terribly expensive, $350 or so, but that's not cheap. And it was dangerous. It had a 1/8 by 1/4 inch part on the tang that was, a built-in failure point near a very sensitive part of the sword. The handle fell apart, and if it had worked, it would still have been a bad sword. It was bulbous and wrong and wanted to hurt you while it was in your hand. But then in action, a sword that was sold as functional basically disintegrated, and anything that was endearing about it is really overshadowed by just how terrible and silly the construction was.
And so it was. I'm asking you that to lead to this. It was sold as a functional blade.
Sold as functional.
And you bought it.
I bought it secondhand, but yes, I bought it. It was made of a cable steel, and I got a good deal on it. I have another one. It's not made of cable, but a company I hadn't heard of before, made of a kind of a cool looking steel. And even though it kind of looked dumb when I saw it on the photos, I thought, well, I'll give it a chance. And then when I got it in hand, I was like, nope, it's dumb. I don't want to review it, but the guy that sold it to me was like, it's cable, it's interesting, you know, maybe it'll impress you. And the first cut that I did actually was on a pool noodle, and I was like, okay, it's not so bad, you know, like it cut a pool noodle, and I was like, maybe I just need to, you know, get that stick out of my ass and be nice. And
Well, it had some sharpness to it, though, right? It did have some sharpness to it.
yeah, it was sharp enough to slap the noodle apart, you know.
Yeah, so it was a working. I mean, if it was sharpened and tempered, then it was a working blade. That's how it was sold.
Yep.
So you're saying 350 was it was 350 brand new?
That's what the original buyer paid for it.
So if you're getting a sharpened blade and it's about 350, which is not cheap, it's pretty much, you know, what you'd expect to have a good working blade, good working sword. So if someone basically sees it, and you know, at first appearance, it looked nice, you know, it looked like a nice looking sword. You know, figure, all right, 350. If I'm shopping for it, you know, looks nice, it's sharp, the steel looks good, the whole folded steel thing going on. And you know, I go and pick it up, I start cutting with it, and the shit breaks in pieces, or maybe the blade starts flying off and maybe hits me in the freaking kneecap or something like that, and I end up killing myself. But you know what? Then I just actually, before I bought that, I actually just saw Matthew Jensen's video, and I saw him basically how bad the integrity of the sword is, and there's some value there. So
there's some value. There's a couple things that come to mind from it, right? Yeah. There's one, understanding that the tang has like a built-in failure point, which may have been an oversight by the vendor, but it certainly makes it hard to trust, right? Because you can't take the sword apart to verify that it's functional. At least not in this type of sword, but other components. So if you weren't going to go and use it in battle, because I mean I did beat the crap out of it, and parts of it lasted for a time, but the handle, like the hilt, disintegrated on me. The crossguard basically fell apart when I threw the sword at a tree. Now, if you were say going to do some reenactment or some stage play, or even joke around with it, you know, gingerly, I mean, throwing it at a tree isn't light. But if it were to take a blow from a sword, it would fall apart, right? Like it's important to know that anything that you're doing with a sword that is in some way related to sword type activities, this product is insufficient and unsafe to be used for that. If it's a wall decoration, that's fine, but that's not what it was sold as.
So in the follow up with what all right. So here's the deal, guys. We're going to get into kind of a subject, but what I wanted to ask you, Matt, was this. When you look at that, because one thing that's becoming more and more, I'm becoming more and more aware of, we can only test what's in our hand. You can only speak to what's in your hand. Is it possible that's a one-off? I don't know what the hell cable steel would matter. Steel.
Just looks
well,
nice.
It's different. It's different. But what I'm saying is, if you're going to make a weapon out of steel, then it needs to hold up. But would you be willing to try it again, or was it just designed? Just note that's it.
Yeah. So there were some interesting takeaways for me, personally, in testing a cable steel blade. One, if what I understand about how they're quenched and heat treated is true, the spine is very soft and the edge was intermittently hard. But the cable steel really, I mean, like I didn't realize at first, but when I was beating it against a metal rod, it had cracked, you know, maybe a fat half-inch into the blade, but it still took more strikes than some of the well heat treated blades. The 3V blade, for example, that I beat against the same rod, it took longer to break this sword apart, and partly because the spine is soft, and that soft material kind of tears. It doesn't crack apart and shatter as much. And, you know, like hard steel is brittle and soft steel is, you know, it bends. But the cross between the two is interesting to see. And further, when I broke it apart, the cable, didn't seem to be very well heat treated. The grain structure seemed, smarter people than me say it's not particularly good, but it broke along the strands of the cable, and I get the impression that steel did something to hold that unit together, and that the failure points didn't have as clear a path to broken as they have on some other homogeneous steels. So yeah. It was interesting, if nothing else, but yeah, that's I'm really pulling at straws to find valuable things to take away from the experience, because in all other ways it was
an atrocity.
Well, yeah. And you know, at this point you've done it long enough, and I would think that after this point in time and how many you've done, If you don't want to review it, there's a reason you don't want to review it. You know, you've done it long enough now that no matter what the seller said, you probably knew in your head at some point. And the heat treat you're describing is the same as would be a kukri, soft spine, hardened edge. And here's the valuable lesson we can. Some people don't know what the hell they're doing when it comes to heat treat. Some people ain't got a damn clue. You know, hey, let's go take a piece of steel off of something and make it. I can make a damn sword at work. It's probably, I can send it to you if you want. It's probably going to kill you. So I think at some point, your experience is valuable. And that's why I wanted to ask you, do you just ever feel like, do you ever just go, Jesus, I don't want to do this? With the sword, not in general.
Even with this one, which I wasn't interested in, it's more because it was fantasy. I don't get a lot of requests to Ala Yuba is not a name that's people are asking a lot of questions about. I think there's kind of people look at that stuff, and not that everyone does, right? But a lot of folks that are buying swords that are at least talking to me look at it and kind of already have a skeptical eye toward it. And so I think I may be substantiating what they already expected rather than showing anything new. It was an opportunity to impress, though, and maybe it would knock your socks off and there was something there. In this case, I think it just kind of met everyone's expectations rather than surprised anyone. But there have been times outside of this where failing has helped. One, I recently broke a relatively expensive 3V blade. Subsequently from the same person that I bought this Ala Yuba sword from. And 3V to me was a sword that I thought would hold up better to steel on steel action. I've seen other people do cutting feats with that steel, and I kind of expected it to do better, and it didn't. It had some pros, but it certainly had some cons. If ridiculousness, the zombie apocalypse.
3V supposed to be like some kind of a super steel or something like that?
It is.
Yeah, it gets into the weeds a little bit, and in some ways it was super. It didn't bend. It held an edge remarkably well. But when I went to a steel rod, it didn't do so well. Well, if people are thinking about it as like the zombie apocalypse super steel of choice, well, if a zombie's wearing a motorcycle helmet or something like that, or maybe you miss and hit a fence post, that blade is not better for it.
Right.
Something that's more resilient is going to be better. In a different case, I tested a manufacturer that I think is still a good manufacturer. But the sword, when I brought it to a barrel, it had performed exemplary up into the point I got to more destructive tests. And I struck a brass fitting on a barrel, and basically the sword broke at the hilt. And I contacted the manufacturer and said, hey, here's what happened. They sent out another one, and the second sample did the same thing. And so, in effect, I showed, kind of a manufacturing failure on this particular sword that they had to go back and revise. But if I hadn't done the striking it into a metal barrel, well, I chopped logs apart with it. I did dumb stuff with it. It didn't break in those scenarios. But on like the second strike into a metal barrel, it snapped at the hilt. And two examples did it at the same time. So again, there's, you can expect things to work until they don't. And then every now and again, you expose some sort of thing that just is frankly unexpected. But that's not, that's certainly the more objective, obvious value, right? Yeah. There's other little nuances, though. We got to remember that everyone starts somewhere. And when you're on YouTube, you don't know who's watching your videos, right? So a lot of people may come into the hobby thinking that, why can't you chop through a tank, right? I heard stories about it. They do it in anime or this movie. And then, you see it in practice and you get a better idea of what to expect. Or if you're a practitioner and you're cutting maybe harder targets, bamboo, wooden dowels, things like that. And there are certainly people that do it. I don't know how many of them there are, but it's common enough. You're concerned about if the sword is going to bend when you're chopping into a log, because one bad cut into a thick tatami mat with a bamboo core in it, those bend blades. And if you can take a log and strike it in, against the grain of the log, bury it in there and kind of boomerang the sword a little bit and have it come out straight, that's an indicator to you that tool is going to probably last in your activity for a while. So there's things to I think be garnered.
Yeah.
Regardless of
without a doubt. And you're testing it in a manner for a company that's asked you to do it. I mean, that's the bottom line. And
Sometimes
here's the other side of the bitch. You bought it. So if you
in
wanted
this
to
case,
take the
yeah.
money and wipe your ass, well, I mean, that at the end of the day, just like I said before we got on here, we can. I would say of the three, I'm the far less spiritual when it comes to blades. Some bitch is a tool. To me, that's what it is. It's a tool. I've been stabbed with one. I've stabbed someone with one. I've been cut and I've cut someone with one. But that's not a happy moment. It didn't make shit what the steel was. It was sharp and it worked. The point being, I don't even know what the hell the point was, but my
Do
thing
what you
with
want
you
with your
is,
money.
yeah,
The
exactly.
point is, and guys, if you haven't figured it out, the premise of the show is obviously that we're glad to have Matt back because he hasn't been on for a while. So we're very happy to be speaking to our friend. But the other point is, there are two sides on this matter. And I respect both sides because they're both valid in their own right. But I think obviously, you have to really just understand it's not an individual. You have to look at the big picture and not just an individual thing. And there are other people that basically, which again, I respect it, that they're looking at, knives or swords that they may own or they may see other people own, and they're looking at them as, it's a disrespect, to basically to push the knife, to have the knife do more than it was meant to do. So that's the premise on one side, and then on the other side is, it can be an educational tool or something you can gain from it by seeing, how it's pushed to failure. Now, let me give you an example, and this is just a shot in the dark, Matt. You started off with Ronin, really doing the pushing to failure tests. So now let's just say if we go back to the first Dojo Pro or the first RK Series Ronin that you tested years back, a long hot minute ago. Okay. Now you recently, and there's a point to this. You recently tested. Did you test another RK Series recently or just a Dojo Pro?
I did an RK in 2020, and then I just did a Dojo Pro.
Dojo Pro. Okay. Now, given the fact that you made the point that manufacturers are, let's just say, taking from your video, and they should be, or essentially you would expect them to improve their product in accordance to basically how they did on your tests. Do you see an improvement in Ronin's product in terms of the durability of their blades from the point that you started testing Ronin swords to the most recent ones that you did now? Do you feel like they improved the grain structure or the durability, or did you feel like it took you a little bit longer to break it? Did they improve anything as a company on the swords compared to the ones you first started with when you were first testing them?
Sure. Well, that's a challenging question to answer, but I would lean more towards yes. Ronin, pretty early on, they were built as like a backyard beater. Durability was the thing that they were known for out of the gate. And I wasn't the first to show that on YouTube, certainly. And I would say in that realm, they've been consistent. But I do recall some of the earlier Dojo Pros that I broke. And looking at the cross section, sometimes the grain structure would be a little bit larger. And when I started, I didn't know that people would want to see that, right? So I didn't get it all. But sometime into testing the Dojo Pros, I showed some of the grain structure, and some of them were more coarse. And the last one that I tested was very clean. I mean, it looked pretty good. So in that realm, it strikes me as an improvement. Where it's tougher to quantify is I wasn't as good at breaking swords, right? So this time around, I broke the sword quicker than I did when I started, but I've got a lot more of them under my belt now.
Well, you didn't have the crochet stick of Doom over there, so
I did not have the crochet stick of Doom. So, so I've gotten a little better at breaking the swords, and I know a little bit more about what to expect. But I would still say they held up really well. In some ways, they haven't improved very much. The Ito is, on the example that I had on the Dojo Pro, was not terribly tight. The Ito on the RK series was actually pretty tight for what it was. And in other ways, I think they've maintained some consistency. But heat treat wise, they seem to be pretty good. And I do recall that at least the Dojo Pro was not as fine a grain structure as the one I recently tested.
But see, that's what I feel like when you do your tests, you do the normal sword things that it's supposed to do and see how it That's why I like the format of your videos, because you'll review the sword, then you'll do whatever the sword is supposed to do, and see how it holds up. If it holds up well, then you start pushing a little further. We just lost SCAB. I guess he'll come back. But what my favorite part of your reviews is when you actually show when the sword finally breaks, is to show the grain structure, because that really tells the story. And I like the whole scientific method. You don't think it's scientific, but it's more or less it's very well thought. It's a thought out method in terms of, all right, we broke the sword, now look at the grain structure and tell me what you think. Do you think it was done well? You think it was, it could have been a little tighter, and it's good because when you see enough of your videos and and you're breaking all these swords and you compare the grain structures, you could see basically, because I feel like when it takes a longer time for you to break the sword, I feel like when you finally do break it, the grain structure is a little tighter. If I'm not mistaken, it looks like, let me bring SCAB in.
So the things that tend to be consistent, and if anything, where my method fails, is it doesn't highlight, like the 3V blade is a great example, right? You might look at the 3V blade, say, well, it only took like 4 licks to get to the center of the Tootsie Pop, so that's a bad blade, right? And it draws away from the attention that, like, well, it stayed razor sharp after I beat it into logs and threw it at trees, and it didn't bend when I tried to do it. Like it did a lot of things really, really well. And if you were a practitioner doing competitive tamashigiri, or if you weren't cutting things that were going to be metal, then it was an excellent sword. It's going to last you longer, and you're not going to have to sharpen it. It holds an edge through some of those activities longer. Maybe that means you're out in the bush longer without having to futz with sharpening. You can push that off. There's tangible benefits to a person that I don't think are necessarily well showcased, when kind of the climax is always, how long does it take to die when it does metal on metal contact. But there's certainly a component of people that value like the zombie apocalypse kind of thing, right? Where if I'm in an end of days scenario, I have access to minimal tools. I'm not a skilled practitioner. I'm tired. I'm flailing around. I'm not using good technique, and I don't get to control that it's a fleshy person in a t-shirt without obstructions. They might be wearing, we might be in the Mad Max kind of. It might be that biker dude with like the metal things and flesh, or who knows what's going to happen. So that's kind of the other side of it that I think is highlighted well. If you're favoring like just pure raw durability and resilience against just ridiculous circumstances, then that test highlights well, resilience in that way. But it doesn't favor things that have edge retention and some of the other things that like 3V showcase as well. Right.
Well, I think that's the thing too, because I've got a knife. I'm gonna release a video tomorrow on the Ursus. It's in 3V, so I think it depends on just exactly what you said, what you're using it for. And I can tell you this: first day of the zombie apocalypse, I'm dying because I'm gonna kill as many people as I can before I go. I'm fat, I'm slow, and I got heart problems. So everybody around me is dying, and then I'm going out. I'm taking all my weapons, walking in the middle of the street, killing as many, especially as they are behind me, taking them out, son. She's about a 65-year-old woman. She's gone. And then I'm gone. So I don't really give a shit. But I think you're spot on. If you had to take, okay, so let me ask you this. In your experience, Matt, and to everybody in the chat, we'll get y'all in a minute. Love y'all. And Freedom Frog, remind me to tell you something. But in your experience, if you needed something to go to combat, you're going steel on steel. And you and I talked about this a little while ago. We talk about once every 5 months. I do it just to make Joe mad. But if you're going into combat and you're going steel on steel, if you're fighting the guy with the leather thong, what steel would you prefer?
Well, so far, at least in the testing that I've done, if I have a budget, then it seems like S7 in a through hardened variety seemed to hold up really an order of magnitude better than a lot of the other stuff did. The Ronin Dojo Pro number 60 made out of 1060, or the Ronin Dojo Pro made out of 1060, I would say, on a budget is also a very solid sword. And I've had through hardened blades in general hold up better. They flex and spring back, and edge retention suffers a little bit, but not a huge amount, and you can probably put the edge back on or hone it if you need to. So I would go through hardened unquestionably. I'd get something that is, I wouldn't do a competition chopper like I'd go with a katana, but not because that's the best sword. I train nearly daily with a katana.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what you know.
At least a few times a week, right? So I've spent a lot of time with it. That's why I would choose that. It's not the best sword. It's just familiarity is helpful in that regard. But I don't want to insinuate that, like, if you have equal familiarity with a different sword, that you would want to choose a katana for some reason. But yeah, I choose like a through hardened S7. From what I've done so far, that seems to hold up really well. Also the cable steel, right? There's some, I think, merit to having little chunks of it break out along the strands of the cable versus crack in half. It might be, I don't know how that would manifest if done well. I haven't gotten a chance to test to failure a cable blade that's been actually well made, but so far I would go S7 through hardened. That seemed to hold up to the end of days scenario a little bit better. And I would lacquer the shit out of the handle, and and even in that scenario, though, like a katana is a futzy choice. There's just maintenance issues that you have to deal with that are integrated into the sword that I'm not going to be well prepared to deal with for very long. So
yeah.
Well, that's why you got to get zombie tools katana. So this way you got kind of like a katana, but it's zombie tools. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. It's very informative, and thank you for jumping in with that. Joe would be the second person I killed. I would probably drive to New York.
Too far away from you. Too far away from you, buddy.
My good night, Jerbs. Hey, real quick to Jerbs, man, we love you. God bless you, and I'm sorry about that. Jerbs had a friend killed in a tragic boating accident earlier today.
Yeah, sorry about that, Jerbs.
Dude, I'm sorry to hear that. My bad said he's headed to the woods, which he lives in the way. Ain't nobody coming to Arkansas, son, or wherever y'all live. I don't think even zombies would come to Arkansas, so I think you're safe. But he made a great point.
There was a
Actually,
note.
My bad made a great point. It's knowledge. And like you said, Matthew, you train every day. That's a big difference, man. Huge difference. I think. Using your
every day is braggadocious, but at least a couple times a week. I can commit to that.
Yep. You know, I wouldn't expect you to, you train with a katana. Why the hell would you pick up a Swiss halberd? That's why I always try to say, use what you use, man. I'm not, that's like these clowns that go buy stuff. I got it for self-defense. You ever use it? No. Well, you're going to die. Goodbye. It's like going into a dojo and the kid teaching you kids how to fight's never been in a fight. They don't get your kid killed.
Now, can you answer this question from Scott? I mean, can we even know if modern steels were
they're far superior?
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's good you call that word out. It is an opinion, but at least from what I understand, modern steels are more homogeneous. They have less issues. There's certainly better steels available. They're also, like, right now we get to benefit from steels kind of realizing they're closer to full potential. Historically, it seems like a lot of the steels were tempered a little bit softer. Obviously, it depends on the region where you're talking about, but if you look at, I guess, medieval European style weapons as a generic, and you talk about some earlier through hardened pieces, they tend to be a little bit softer than the equivalent ones that we would see in reproduction markets today. And in the percussive stuff that I do with swords, it's interesting that those through hardened and softer blades tend to withstand and be more resilient. So if you're thinking about bashing into shields and whacking at spearheads and pikes and things like that, and that's what the tool is used for. A brittle sword might break, but a soft sword might bend. But you can probably bend it back and keep going. So it seems like maybe there was some interesting reason to why they were tempered a little softer, or ended up being a little softer. Obviously, that's not, you can't apply that across the board. But I'm pretty sure that unquestionably modern steels now are superior to what was used.
What was used before?
In
I'm
every
wondering
way.
if you guys are getting there's a massive thunderstorm going on here right now. I'm wondering if it's coming in through the mic. That's why I keep on looking up, because I felt like thunder just hit my house or something. It's insane. But if Matt, if you had to basically, if let's just say, all right, end of days. All right, let's just stupid scenario, end of days. The guy told you, listen, I got inside information. End of days is coming. I'll make you up one of my last swords. What steel would you want me to use to make up your end of days katana? All right, let's just say you want a katana. Katana, fine. I understand that. So end of days katana. What steel would you advise this smith? If you have the choice of anything out there right now that you've tested, what steel would you have this smith make you on your end of days katana?
Sure.
I think you just answered that.
I did. And
Good job,
I would
Joe.
say the S7,
which particular steel though?
S7.
Would you pick?
That's
Okay.
that's the one I would. I don't know if that's the best, but in the hands-on application that I've done now, that one seemed to last longer. I've tested 5160 and 6150 and 1060 and 1075, and I've broken folded blades and laminated blades and 1095 blades and and I've tested a few of them, and I've broken a few of them. And the S7 blade that I tested, which in fairness I only did one of, lasted longer, and it held an edge in a way that I thought was reasonable. It withstood bending and stuff in a way that I thought was exemplary, and it didn't break in half very quickly. So if it was end of days, I'd go that way. But because I did touch on that already, I'll tell you why zombie apocalypses aren't going to happen. I remember there was a top 10 list about like why you really don't need to worry about it. And I think number one is a good punchline. So I'll tell you a couple things. I don't remember all 10, but one, zombies are dumb. So we're going on like Walking Dead zombies. They're slow, they're mushy, and they're pretty dumb, right? Not like the super zombies that run fast and think good. Okay, so dumb zombie apocalypse, not going to work. One, shopping carts, right? People leave them sons of bitches all over in the Costco. Zombies are going to get stuck in them. People already get stuck in them. If zombies are dumber than people, shopping carts might universally already save us. Two, cliffs and shit, right? Like they're going to walk off cliffs, like they get lost, bumped into woods. I mean, gators at Disneyland are going to eat them. There's all sorts of stuff that's going to happen. Just various land obstacles will reduce the population of zombies. Okay, three, I live in Minnesota. This doesn't apply to people, that don't live in a place that gets freezing 10 months out of the year. But if zombies are still 80% water, because they're still made of human meat, then they're going to freeze. They're big ice cubes. All right. Like you go outside too long in Minnesota, you become a popsicle. They're not dressing for the weather, right? They're just walking. They hear a noise. They walk that way. So yeah, they're going to freeze. And then when you freeze, like again, your head breaks, right? So they're like the zombies thaw. Well, if your head freezes, when it unfreezes, it starts to crack. So there's going to be some brain damage there. I'm pretty sure that's gonna take it out. But those are all like, haha, whatever. The number one reason that I recall from this list, which wasn't mine, is hunting licenses. Okay, we don't have to worry about zombies because of hunting licenses. And if you're not seeing how they connect, Joe, we have to issue licenses in the United States so that we have a wildlife population, right? Otherwise, there wouldn't be deer and geese and there wouldn't be frogs. There wouldn't be anything that you could shoot. It would be gone. Okay. Hunting licenses restrict us from just obliterating all wildlife in the country. Okay. So if you're telling me that like now the zombie apocalypse is on and there's 3 guns for every man, woman, and child in the country and ammo to boot, maybe, then I don't see how this is a real problem. Right? Like we have problems getting people to not shoot each other right now. If there is a scenario where that is not where the floodgates are open there, I don't see how.
Well, you understand I said hypothetical.
Yeah, hypothetical. I'm just saying,
just to say,
when people like zombie apocalypse, I'm like hunting licenses.
Just trying to highlight, a strong steel out there. That's pretty much all it is. But yeah,
I think you would struggle to find zombies to use a katana on.
Yeah. This is what I'm going with. My warring. Hey, have you ever had a steel out of 1055, a sword? Mm-hmm. Have you ever done a sword out of 1055? A legit sword, not a cold steel sword.
Oh, well, they're legit-ish. So some of the windlass pieces are made out of 1055. I want to say that the sword of Rovin that I tested from windlass some time ago I didn't break it, but I swung it around and it was sufficient out of 1055. And a lot of the hammers and axes tend to be made out of it.
The reason I ask is it seems like Cold Steel does everything out of 1055. The axe, the broadsword I have back here that's too big for anything. But I've noticed with this, I've hit everything with this. And it just doesn't. So I was curious if somebody did a good sword out of 1055, or is it just kind of a eh?
I don't know if 1055 specifically, but
right?
I think it can make a sufficient sword. I've tested swords made out of 1045 and 1060 and 1055 being somewhere between them.
In between.
Either one I think is sufficient. The higher the carbon content, there's stuff that goes in it, but I think 1055 would be a sufficient sword to make material out of, or make a sword out of. And I do recall, I want to say it was a gentleman by the name of Ron Macy that used 1050 to make swords. He made katana for a time, and I think he does. I'm not sure he does it now, but I remember seeing some katana he made out of 1050, and it wasn't as common a steel to use. But yeah, it can be a perfectly fine steel to use.
I was just curious.
Yeah, I imagine like
Joe's talking about thunderstorms. I thought I'd bring up Cold Steel. So,
but Joe, the real question is, what steel would I choose if a zombie apocalypse happened?
Very funny. But basically, I think, honestly,
Brandon, what's going on, buddy?
Knife makers and sword makers are different in terms of the steel they choose to use. I mean, like Cold Steel, like I guess that's the steel they use. They've been successful with it. It's a certain size comparison, a certain thickness in the spine. And there's certain applications that in terms of making a knife compared to making a sword is different. Like the same way you can't take, what's a popular knife steel? Like you can't take S35VN and make a sword out of it because it'll break. It's too long. But if you make S35VN on knife size or a 5-inch blade or something like that, it'll hold up because, it's just, I guess, a physics thing, So there's certain steels that are just more applicable for certain sizes.
A knife, when you're using it, like if you look at, I guess some of the best cuts as they pass through a tatami mat or something like that might not show a lot of deformation in the sword, right? It's not going to flex or move around very much. But if you watch some like slow-mo cutting, and I'm sure there's a few different instances of it. Actually, I think the slow-mo guys even cut like a water bottle or something like that with a katana. But they wiggle around a lot. Like if you see them in slow-mo, that there's a lot of stress that's going on the blade that just doesn't happen the same way in a knife.
Right.
And so you have to have something that's going to flex a little bit. Otherwise it stands to reason it would shatter.
Yeah. So there's a reason why I think they just choose different steels. And it also depends on the smith. Like my belief is it's also in the hands of the smith. If a smith is very good at working with a certain type of steel and his heat tempering is spot on, like what steel does Work Tough Gear use, SCAB?
SK85.
They're good with the SK85. I mean, they're experts with it. I mean, they're flawless in terms of their heat temper, and that's what they choose to use. Because that's what they do.
A lot of manufacturers also farm out the heat treatment to somebody else, right? So
yeah, that's a big
they might have it commercially done.
That's a big topic in the knife community right now. That's why people are making up shirts that say Rick Hinder's an asshole and wearing them to Blade Show. But I think, Matt, one of the not too long ago, both Joe and I
Brandon.
tested Tactical Everyday Dad. There's a guy named Daniel Zugi who makes knives, and he does the Magna Cut. He does his heat treat in house. I'm telling you, he did it, and I've only got to do one production run Magna Cut, a Hogue Deccan. I gave it to a guy, but Daniel does his heat treat spot on, man, because everything, and he's done. I think how many knives, Joe? 3 or 4 out of the Magna Cut?
Daniel? Yeah, about three.
And I don't know if you're familiar with it, Matt, or just kind of don't give a shit.
Nope.
But I thought we'd pass some time with it after we going through. I do want to ask you before the show's over, what steel you would use in case of the zombie apocalypse. So let's write that down. But
it's in a shovel this time.
I think heat treat's got as much. I think heat treat's got as much to do with it as anything. And Joe, I think you're right. I do think there are some steels that, you know, one's a knife, one's a sword. But I think heat treat's got as much as anything. I did want to ask you this, Matthew, and it's not the steel.
It's S7, Joe. It's S.
Well, at least whenever people play back this live later, they will have that information no matter where they watch it, and they'll know exactly what we're talking about.
Most important.
So why not repeat a very important fact over and over again?
Here's what they'll appreciate.
For you guys.
Matthew spending 10 minutes answering a question, you looking at the ceiling and asking him the same question. That's some dynamic journalism there. I did want to ask you this. The Chinese katanas. Now, are these like, I know Joe waited forever. Are these actually forged or do we know? And what I'm asking you is, are they hand forged, even if they're using modern techniques, or are they water jetted out, heat treated and gone?
I would venture a guess that the majority of them have some level of forging, but probably start from either round or bar stock, which isn't. It's not as though they're getting it into some sort of like crucible billet and then drawing it out from there, like you might see done on like a historical documentary or something. So they're probably starting with round or bar stock, which is, you know, maybe close to length and cutting it out. There's probably other examples. This isn't like applicable to everything, but as you see the $100 1060 sword, that's probably was made out of bar stock. And then there's some, you know, folks that have gone to the forges in China, show them hammering them out, and they're pretty quick with it. And it's, you know, a process that they move through. And the steels that they use are, I would guess, subject to what's available and commercially viable based on what they're charging. If you're talking about doing like exotic steels, it's not that they're thousands of dollars probably, but that they're, when you're selling a sword for $100, I mean, you're probably not using a bar of steel that cost $1,000, right? So,
right.
Or 100 even. Like there has to be some profit in it for you. So, cheap and available steels, but at the same time, they tend to use 1045, 1060, 1095, and T10 are probably the most common and prolific steels that get used. 5160 being in there as well. And it seems like Chinese forges know how to work with this material pretty well to make a decent sword. And I'd argue that's really the case with either 5160 or 1060 in particular. It seems like they really know how to do the most with that. I have less faith when I see a $300 sword from China made out of L6, right? That's a steel that Howard Clark in the U.S. uses, and he's a prolific and respected smith that he treats his stuff in house, and you know, figured out how to do it, and has gone through the paces and paid the tuition to know how to work with it. But even a respected forge in China like Hanwei, I tested an L6 blade from them many years ago, and I bumped it into my stand. I did a bad cut, and I've hit $50 swords into this stand and not had damage, but it rolled the edge by bumping it into the top of my stand, which was just wood. It's, you know, pine wood, and it rolled the edge. So like, and Hanwei is one of the more respected companies out there, and the heat treatment wasn't sufficient from them. So when I see like these exotic steels used on really inexpensive pieces out of China, then I either A, doubt that it is the material that's advertised, or B, that it's heat treated in a way that really realizes the potential of that steel.
It's a suspect there. When you see,
it's not a guarantee. It could be fine, but it's certainly like, well, the steel you're talking about is more expensive. You can't be as familiar with working with it, and maybe it's all true. It's entirely possible, but it certainly makes me raise an eyebrow. And I think a lot of people poo-poo the 1060 steel or the 1095 because it's boring, and there's other steels that have flashy stuff. But what folks don't realize when they go to buy a sword based on steel alone is you can't look at it like, I don't know, the horsepower in a car or the megahertz in your computer or something like that. It's not 1060 from this company and L6 from that company aren't necessarily playing on equal grounds. If the people making it aren't familiar with how to temper that material properly or work with it to make a sword, then you end up with this very exotic, fancy steel, if it is in fact that steel, that is an order of magnitude worse in performance than the really cheap material that those people are familiar with working on.
Yeah. That's exactly my it could be called my opinion, but I honestly think the steel doesn't matter at all. Not at all. I can't say at all. It doesn't matter as much as the hands of the people who are working with that particular steel. So
well, it's an argument of all things being equal, right?
Right.
If we're in a scientific environment and you have a process by which to exactly get the results out of the steel that you want, and then you evaluate them from there. Well, that's one thing, but that's just not a realistic scenario that ever happens. We know that even well-regarded manufacturers have a lot of variety in how the outcome of the swords, right? Some make some duds, and there's some excellent pieces out there. They're not scientifically controlled where they're universally consistent every single time. And then on top of that, when you add in every other manufacturer, it doesn't work that way.
Right. Like this Huawei sword I picked up. Do you all know that the entire order process, I just picked the sword that I wanted. I saw it. I only learned it was T10 when I actually reviewed it. I didn't even know it was T10. I didn't even look to see what steel they made, because I would just went by the reputation of the fact that they make good blades, and they're very successful in their blades. And I only when I was doing the review, I realized, oh, okay, it's T10. I didn't even look to see if it was T10, 1095, L6. I didn't really care, because I went by the reputation of what the company does. Whereas if I'm shopping from another company, I would probably look at the steel, but I think it just goes by the reputation of what the company does more than the steel that they're.
Well, that's where reputation matters more than it has,
right?
In the past, right? Is that yes, you kind of go on faith that the person doing it is doing it well. If there's a car that you buy, you can hopefully take it someplace safe and stick your foot on the gas and see if proof is in the pudding. If you have another thing, generally you can kind of put it through its paces. But with a sword, you're never going to know what it's made out of, and hopefully you're not striking anything hard enough to break it,
right?
because inevitably that's going to require there'll be some consequences for that. So
SCAB, I'll ask you that question too. In terms of basically, if you're going to buy a knife,
what steel would I use in the zombie apocalypse?
No, I'm not asking you that. I think we covered that a couple of times. I think we're good. Okay. Do you really look at the steel, or do you look at basically the quality of the knife company that you're buying from? Like, how much do you really look at the steel? I know handles are very important to you, and they're important to me too.
Here's the deal. Couple things. One, hold on. Thank you. Okay.
Hey, Meg.
Hey. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. Couple things. One is I gave that Hogue Deca to Salty Red Corn. My bad. Thank you, brother. Doesn't matter. I was sitting here thinking while you were listening to the thunder. Here's the thing, Joe. I think reputation matters more to me. Brandon Thrasher just did a video on an Essie made by Rowan, who they specialize in 1095. I like the Essie Avispa, and I have an Essie 6. I don't like Essie, and they've never done anything. They make quality stuff. It's a great company. It's an American make. Well, Rowan makes their stuff, but it has to kind of speak to me. So Joe, I would go on reputation, like Tops. If you said SCAB, you want to yep, because I know they're going to do 1095. I know they're going to do it correctly. Now, I wouldn't turn down an Essie, and Matt, I was going to ask you this, and Joe, you the same. Are there companies that, well, I'm going to answer, and then I'll ask. I think my answer would have to be reputation, Joe, because one, when I say I'm a novice at best, it's not a fucking job. I'm not kidding. So I don't sit here and study charts about steel. I could give a shit. My thing, and I'm not trying to be an ass there. I'm really not. Does it work? That's what I care. Does it work? So I'm going to go with reputation. Now, what I'm going to ask you both is this: is there a company that you're just like, no matter what they do, you at least want to try it? It speaks to you. Like Work Tough Gear for me is just the balls. I love Work Tough Gear, even if it's a knife that may not be in my wheelhouse. And I'll say this, KHHI, I'm a big fan of their stuff, Cold Steel. Do you guys have companies that it's like, okay?
Well, I'll answer it first, and then I'm going to pass it to Matt because he obviously has a lot more experience in testing so many different types of swords than I
just
do.
Don't shut up, so it's probably best for me to
so
go
I
on.
figure I'll let him basically go on. From my little experience I've had so far in the year and a half that I've been collecting katana, the two manufacturers that I would say that I'm pretty confident in what they give me so far are going to be Skygiro and Huawei so far. Now, I have went with like all the companies like SON, JQ, they're all pretty much all in the same batch in terms of what you think you're going to get. Maybe one will be better than others, but they're all pretty much around the same level that you could expect a certain type of quality. But the two companies that I'm looking at right now, in my little experience, are going to be probably Skygiro and Huawei, where I can say I'm pretty confident that whatever sword I get from them, I'm not looking at their steel. I'm not looking at anything. I'm just looking at what they're producing. I'm pretty confident that I'm going to get a good working, good quality product. So, Mr. Jensen.
With companies, I would probably say there's not a brand that I'm gaga over to just try whatever they put out. I'm always interested. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's certainly not that I would poo-poo the opportunity, but I can't think of a company where I tend to get a little bit more eager is with kind of special projects, right? So if it's a new model and there's going to be 1,000 of that thing, I feel a little less interested. If it's a custom smith and they put their own unique kind of talents or interests or passions into it, and I can see it in the way that they forge it out, then I'm more eager to kind of hold that stuff. The models tend to, not that they're not different, but I don't know, they don't have the same zazz in that way. When I evaluate them, it's I don't know, you've seen me make the same video like 300 times, right?
Right.
I look at them and I evaluate some of the little nuances of them, but there's a lot of similarity between them, and so it's not as fun to go over them, especially if they're in abundance. As a side note, I do want to just address, I see one question because I finally figured out how to see the chat side. Garen asked if I tested a Techno Woods blade, and I have, not to failure, but I did, and I tried to respond, but I tagged the wrong person. So yes, I've tested a Techno.
And let me say this, I guess, and I want to clear this up. SC is a great company, American made and all that shit. And they're a great company. They make a great product. It just doesn't speak to me. And I guess that's kind of my thing. Matt, you run your channel like a brand in a business, and you and I've talked about this. So you answered about the way I thought you would answer. Joe, spot on, buddy. John Kennedy, good seeing you, man. But no, you both answered like I thought you would. But there's like, I'm sitting here looking at the chat. My bad. Adventures, Bark Rivers, his jam. John Kennedy loves his scramma, and I know that. It's good seeing you, Charles. So I don't want anybody to think I'm poo-pooing on Essie or shitting on, that sounds more to Essie, because I'm not. But I'm just saying, I think with like, it's just some of the stuff. And Matt, I've got something coming that I'm going to send you once I get done with it. From this Shade Indonesia, and you were talking about fantasy being functional. These guys have done that as good as I've seen anybody. And I know I have several things coming, but I've got a sword. I'm going to review it and I'm going to send it to you. Just to get
collaboration.
You're not going to hurt my feelings. I don't give a shit, But I want to get your take, because it's one thing. I'd send it to Joe, but he'd be out there in the storm with it. By the power of Grayskull, you got to watch him. You can't. but no, I've got something I'm gonna send Joe too. But I guess it's just finding a company like Joe. What's your knife company, man? What if I said, Joe, I'm sending you a knife? What knife company? If you just right now off the cuff, what would you go with?
I would say Work Tough Gear.
Okay.
I would say Work
Matt,
Tough
I know
Gear.
You're not a knife guy, but if you like a
Cold Steel and Work Tough Gear are my knives.
Yeah. I use a Benchmade. I have this guy, which has been my pocket knife for a minute. I think I've talked about it a few times, but I like drop tip fixed blade knives. I can't carry a fixed blade all the time, but I like drop tips, and I like this Benchmade. I lose my pocket knife a lot. I carry a knife everywhere I can, and most of the time that means it has to be a pocket knife. And my preference is with a drop tip, and I've had a few different iterations, but the Kershaw that I had, I had a buck knife for a while, and nothing particularly special, but that's because I didn't want to spend, as I've gotten older, gotten a little bit more money in my pocket, I was okay with spending a little bit more. But even spending like $100-something on a knife that I know might fly out and I won't notice and I'll lose it, it's tough to do. They're really tools, and I pick my fingernails with them, I pry shit with them, they break, and then I move on. But it's not a.
But you use it.
Yeah, and this one I've sharpened up and futzed around with, and I've managed not to lose it. But that's also because it's more expensive, and I kind of pocket check a little bit more. Like, is that shit still there?
Yeah, that makes a
but
difference.
Yeah, I've been very happy with it. I've had it for years. I've thrown it in the wash a few times accidentally with my pants. I've dropped it in a lake, and it may or may not have been there frozen for a little while. I've certainly thrown it at things, and it's held up. So I'm very happy with the performance and how it's held up so far. So I wouldn't hesitate doing that. I don't. I like this knife though. I don't like all of their knives. I have a different one, and I was like, oh, I like this one. I like some other shape that I got a deal on, and I was like, I don't like it. I like this model.
Yeah. Well, that and
which is the Barrage, answer. I think, or Mini Barrage. I don't know.
See, that's the thing. Like with Benchmade, I've owned two, and mine has zip to do with political. I could give a shit about their. I found one I liked. I gave it away. I bought another one, and I think I sold it to Jimbo. It's one of those things. Now Kershaw, I love, but I carry I carry a lot of Cold Steel. But I did want to say too, when it comes to like custom makers, I've seen Pearson custom blades, and I love the Pearsons and their blades. Do you have a custom maker, Matthew, that you would want a sword from?
Well, that's a long list. I've had a few custom knives, not as many as swords, certainly, and I've enjoyed them. And I definitely like them more but I wouldn't want to carry it. In fact, I know you asked me about swords, and I'll answer you, but first I'm going to talk about knives because reasons. But I have a knife made by a gentleman named Ed Martin, and it's a drop tip fixed blade knife. Go figure, right? I said I like them, and the knife is perfect to me. I love the way it feels. It's my favorite knife, and I just can't bring myself to use it though because it's a $400 knife, right? So I don't carry it around. I don't use it. I pick it up and I'm like, this is perfect, and then I put it away and I stick it on my wall back there somewhere. Because I can't just like as a tool, I know what happens to them, and I just don't want it to not be perfect anymore. Plus, it's $400, so it's tougher to justify doing that since it's also my $400, right? Like it's not a sample that I was sent to, put through the paces and share. It's my own money, and I'm somewhat loath to part with, to destroy it. Or at least mar it in such a way, because I know I'm going to fuck it up and lose it and drop it, and the tip is going to break. That's just what'll inevitably happen. And I've had other blades from like Rick Barrett and things like that, who is a sword maker. That's why I'm I'm getting there. Some of the things I really like about his work in swords are present on the knives, and I've enjoyed them, but I always find that I sell them because I would rather have that money in a sword, which I appreciate a little bit more, than a knife, which I know I'm not going to use and don't like as much. But there is a laundry list of people that I would absolutely love to have swords from. I'm fortunate to own a few of them already, but like, even though if I have one, yes, thank you, sir, may I have another, would be my answer.
Yeah. And that's kind of the question. That's it.
Yeah, there's a lot of custom makers, and it'd be hard for me to choose one in particular. I mean, because it's unapproachable, like Yoshindo Yoshihara, like he's a very famous Japanese smith, but like I don't think I'll live long enough to get past his waiting list, and I don't think I'll ever be rich enough to afford one of his swords. But I might get to see one like on display at a show or something like that.
What is he pricing them at right now?
I don't know. I have no idea. 50 grand.
They're in the tens of thousands. Yeah,
not tens, like 50s. I would guess, because
it would be the wait time before the 50. I mean, I'm big on TikTok. I don't know if y'all know that, which will mean a lot in the zombie apocalypse when we're trying to pick a steal. Probably ask TikTok, but the thing is this, Matt, and I ask you this again: if you could get one, and I'm not going to attempt to say his name, and you got one, would you cut anything with it?
Probably not. No.
Would you be tempted to?
Of course, every time I looked at it, but that doesn't. I mean, I get that temptation with all the swords that I get, and
I'm asking you all this. I'm asking you this for a reason.
I would be. No, I wouldn't. Now, in fairness, though, like the smith that I noted, right, would be he's not selling it as the zombie apocalypse cutter. Like, it's an artisanal, traditionally made Japanese style sword from a master of his craft, right? And that it can certainly cut, but it's not necessarily going to be terribly durable. It's just going to be a beautiful object of art, and a deadly weapon. But with the amount of investment, if I did fork that money down, I don't know that I would do that. Alternatively, if I bought something from like a Dan Keffler, who makes some really amazing swords that are really performance driven, I think and the polish on them isn't destroyed by whacking a pool noodle, like a very artistic polish on a Japanese style sword might be. I'd probably go whack a pool noodle or some light targets with it, because I wouldn't diminish the value demonstrably by doing so.
Well, and that's kind of where I was going with it. Your passion for swords supersedes breaking them. And I love all. See, here's my problem. I got Captain Electro gave me that Medford, and it's between $800 and $900. It's Medford Praetorian T. Not only did I do a hard use test on it, Donnie did, and I'm saying that because no matter the cost, to me it's a tool. Now, if I go buy whatever sword guy you said and have $50,000, I'm probably going to need it to kill Megan, because she's going to kill me first, because I just spent 50 grand on a sword. But I would also have a boat and a leopard print leotard or Speedo, because I'd have that kind of cash. But you love swords. Do you just break them for shits and giggles? I think that's and the answer is no. We know why.
No, I mean it's a rare. So the breaking swords for me, and I did make a video on it some time ago, but it started because the first video I made was that, and I reached out to Ronan and I solicited them. I asked them if they would send me a sample to break, right? And then I started to get more of them, right? And most vendors, the only one that's really ever said go break it, Quinn Waterfield told me to go break one that he sent me, and Beiser with their S7. Other than that, everyone has sent me something and said do what you want with them. They're not asking me to break them. But for the longest time, I felt really weird about having something that was sent to me of value, and I didn't want to mail it out to other people, because I know you guys do it. I respect you for it. That's fine. There's just drama involved with it that I don't want to deal with personally. So I don't want to send it out. but I also don't want to keep it, right? So I thought, well, if I break it, then there's some value because people have responded well to it, and I see that there's some perk. But then I also don't have any conflict of interest. I'm left with something of relatively negligible value, and I feel good about that at the end of the day. I've changed my tune a little bit. I can't keep up with it anymore. It takes too much time to do.
Yeah.
And there's some benefit to having some around as examples. So I'm now only recently in 2022 have I said I'm not going to break everything I get. I just break most of the things I get, but I don't break the things I buy.
Right.
Well, that's
Rarely.
Here's my
Well, I
thing.
did buy the last one, but that's one of the few that I bought myself. I paid my own money.
If I send something out, like if I send you something that breaks, it fucking breaks. I don't get all worked up over it. If I send Joe something and he breaks it, he'll tell you, it is what it is. You know, conversely now, I get a little weird, and I've got a lot of great folks in this community that's kept this channel going by sending me, not like JR, I think it's in the chat, and a bunch of the guys, but JR, I've probably got, well, I don't want to say, I've got a lot of money of JR's in there. He buys them and sends them to me before he even looks at them.
He doesn't even look at them yet. I mean, that's crazy.
And so when I'm out there, trust me, when I'm out there banging away, that in the back of my head, there's always that, hey, I personally feel some kind of a sense of responsibility. I'm not going to just be an ass and break everybody's knife. I could.
Well,
but
I think there's,
it's different. It's a different, people are saying, Matthew, break this. Nobody says, hey, Scab, break this.
There's a few different reviews that I'll get, right? So one, if a vendor sends me something, and that's different than a private sword friend, right? There's a person with skin in the game who's getting advertising basically from me doing the video. I don't ever take money. I'll take cutting targets and return label if they want the thing back. But there's some skin in the game for them, basically, right? They're sending me a thing, and I kind of get to do whatever I want to do with it, right? Most of the time. Some vendors want it back. Some vendors will say, my sword isn't for breaking, cut some basic stuff with it, but then send it back. Don't whack it into a steel bar. That's not the person that we're trying to target. And then I say as much in the video, and I send the sword back to them. But I also have people that have lent me their stuff, and most of the time they don't want it broken. I give a visual tour, I do some basic cutting, but the same thing, it's in the back of my mind that this is another person's property, and they're trusting me with kind of stewardship for the moment to share the benefits and what I can with some limited usage. And then I do that, but I'm just upfront with what it is. Is it a review sample? Do I intend to break it? And I think that intent is also there, right? If I say this is somebody's property and I have to return it, well, now you know that you're watching a guy cutting who doesn't want to hit the rock, who doesn't want to hit the stand, who isn't trying to hit the floor accidentally with the sword. And you can take that for what it's worth as the viewer. Alternatively, if I say, I got this as a review sample, I didn't spend any money on it, my intention is to walk you through it and then break it, kind of going in that when I'm swinging, I'm not pulling punches, right? I'm trying to evaluate how long it's going to hold up, but I'm doing it with the intent of damaging the item.
Right.
And I think both are valid and both are useful. I'm certainly happy to do either one, particularly when it's useful. There's a guy, sword friend Ian, who has lent me a number of pieces from Lance Connect Emporium. And if he didn't do that, I would never have exposure to that brand. And I've really come to enjoy their wares. So I'm really glad for the experience,
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, Frog, all I was going to say, buddy, is I got the knife in, I got the box in, I got the guy's address, and I will send it out. My bad adventures, I can't make it this year, man. Everything fell through, and it is what it is. Talking about Blade Show in Atlanta. JR said, I'd rather it break while you're testing it than 5 miles out in the woods. And my thing with that, though, JR, is this. I'm going to test it the way I test it. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is it is always, because like JR and Timbo and a lot of guys have been super, super good to me. That is in the back of my mind. There are certain tests that I do stay away from. I'm not, somebody was like, so and so hammered a knife through a chain. What do you think? I said, well, I think they're a dumbass. When would you do that in real life? If you got to hammer a knife through a chain, you're fucked. I'm just not doing it. But I wanted to talk about. I just picked up on what you were saying, and I do want to discuss this. You're talking about giveaways, right?
Mm-hmm.
The liability. Yep. Let me just say this. If I give somebody a knife and they're too damn stupid not to hurt themselves with it or somebody, I'm not liable for that son of a bitch. I can tell you that right now. That's just my opinion on it. But that's
important because that's not legally true everywhere.
I live in
but
Florida.
there's also some situations around giveaways where there is it a giveaway, is it a sweepstakes, is it a raffle, right. Who can enter?
Well, it's a gift. It's generally a gift. I mean, you're gifting somebody. It's like, let's just say I get a gift for a friend of mine. I get for whatever the occasion. It doesn't have to be occasion. Mm-hmm. It's a gift. I give him a knife. Mm-hmm. He basically goes out and he cuts his finger off with it. Is he going to basically now legally be able to say, oh, he gave me the knife, I'm going to press charges against him? No, it was a gift.
Well, do you check IDs? You know, a large portion of the people that watch my channel are under 18. Not the largest part. Most people are probably old dudes, but
you got to kind of disclose when you're doing these giveaways. Right. You have to disclose. Sure. You have to be 18 years old.
Do you think if a parent of dumb kid that cuts themselves up is going to care what you said in your YouTube video when you, as a private person, send them a knife? Like,
point taken. I mean, that's always in the back of my mind. I understand your point.
Yeah, I mean, there's that component of it, which I think there's not terribly difficult ways to kind of get around. Doing drawings. If you were to just say, hey, friend of the channel, you've done good stuff, I'm going to give you a gift, and you just pull it out and send it to somebody, and there's not any sweepstakes or rules. But if you do hey, I'm going to send it to you, here are the conditions of my raffle or contest, there's some legal requirements and disclosures that often have to be outlined there. And people get sued on YouTube. The bigger you are, the more of a target you have on you, and people make their monies by going around and suing creators who do it wrong. Right. I don't think I'm big enough to attract that attention, but I don't want to bother with the opportunity. And the other thing is, it seems like it pisses a lot of people off, and everyone is subject on like, is it fair? It seems like the more things get added up, I just don't want to. It's a lot to deal with, and then I have people that already, even though I've never done a giveaway, it's not that I've never given anything away. I've given some broken bits to other creators that can breathe new life into them. Early on, when I was getting samples and felt weird about it, and I got more than I could handle or extras, I gave them to other creators who could do cool stuff with them. I've sold some. I've done some other, broken bits anyway, not good finished stuff. But it's not that I haven't given anything away. It's just that I don't want to be watched for that reason either.
Well, no,
and I already get asked every day. Yeah.
Listen, nobody watches together. I mean, there's a little group of traveling folks who want to win, and they're known in the and knife community is different than sword community, because all that's been addressed. And I mentioned this for a couple reasons. One, I value your input. Two, you're going at my second year anniversary is June 23rd. I'm going to do giveaways differently going into the third year, and that's this. I'm just going to pick somebody and give it to them, just like you said. I'm going to start giving more shit to the people who's rode with me. And before anybody says fair, if I buy that son bitch, it's as fair as it's going to be. And that's the way I look at it. Now, I asked Joe to help me with this raffle for fairness sake, because you can tell I get single-minded, and I know that's hard to believe. So I did ask Joe, because he worries a little more about it than I do. But I wanted to bring that up because I wanted your take on it. Because that's something that we don't. Here's the thing. I like giving shit away, but I hate giveaways. I hate them. I hate doing them. I'd rather just say, hey, man, I'm sending you this knife. And that's kind of where I'm going to start going in year 3. It's just, hey, you rode with me. I'm sending you a knife. There's my giveaway.
Right.
I think that I have no problem watching you guys as creators or other people that do giveaways, and I don't think less of or it's certainly just something that I look at and say it's not for me, right? I see the risk reward and I find it to be small. I think it encourages a type of viewership, or at least attracts people that aren't really interested in what I make and are there for the wrong reasons. And then I have to keep up with it. And on top of that, it takes a lot of energy to do it well. And I have a certain amount of time. And so I look at, would you rather have a small chance in hell of getting a mediocre or potentially already broken sword? Or would you rather I make content with it? Would you rather I push it to failure so that everyone can enjoy it? Or instead of spending my time and energy into doing a giveaway, that I make another video? Because I don't really have time to do both. This is not this is not a full-time thing.
It's crazy because that's basically it's if you think back, you have a certain principle as far as your beliefs, and I respect it 100%. I do. I'm not saying I don't. Certain principle as far as how you approached getting swords for review, and holding on to them or giving them away, and you have a certain principle of how you approach that. And the fact that basically now you turn this into now something that's actually very valuable in terms of bringing swords to failure, and something that could actually be very educational, informational, it just developed into the channel that you have now.
But I think that's
with the
valid. I think that's a great point, though, Joe, because Matt, you do solicit getting swords, so I think that's way different. I think that's a big difference too. Like if you're like, hey, can I review this sword, and then you start giving it away, companies, I think if that got out, I don't think you'd get near the samples. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've never really tested the waters on hey, will you send me some extra so I can do giveaways? A lot of times, like, companies are
no. I'm talking about if you're like, hey, if you review
give me to review and then I'm going to give it away. Yeah.
I think honestly, they would balk at that.
I don't know. I'm not sure, because there's undeniably engagement and promotion that goes along with it. You attract more people. And the more eyes is that's why the company gave you the sword, right? That's why I got it, was to evaluate it, to basically, I mean, if there were a company that made promotional material, they would charge more to make the content than the cost of the item itself. And if it's favorable, then, it stands to be good publicity for them. I don't think they would really care if I gave it away. Honestly, really? I don't think most would.
I'm weird with that, because like my Work Tough Gear stuff, they're the guys who have, they want me to review them when you see it. So I don't give that shit away. I might give Joe something, I might give Jim, but I wouldn't personally feel right about doing a get. You know what I'm saying? Now I'm using 2 for the raffle, but I kind of got permission with that. That's just, I'm just asking you some of this stuff that I feel like could be a slippery slope.
I haven't gotten the impression that anyone cares if I give the stuff away. I've told folks though that, like, I don't.
It, though, right?
No, and
Really?
is a lot of them have. I mean, I don't want to speak across the board for every vendor, but generally speaking, that's what most people do with it, right? They get a sample, they play with it, and then eventually it goes up for sale. And that's, I mean, in fairness, right? Like, that's one way that you kind of justify the cost of doing the videos. Now, I like doing them, and I would feel weird about that, so I don't. But yeah, a lot of people will get a review sample and then sell it, and that's part of the way they pay their bills.
Pay their bills as far as getting paid for the review, right?
Yeah, and sword reviews are not terribly popular things, even from the people that make them. So part of the justification in doing it is that you can part ways with the item and get a couple extra $100 for it, or whatever it happens to be. I choose not to do that. I don't. If somebody else can do it without feeling weird about it, power to them. I just happen to feel it gives me the heebie-jeebies. But generally, the vendors don't care. They just consider it my property. I haven't had vendors ask me or tell me what to do with a review sample. There's some very rare exceptions about, like, hey, I want you to be sure and cut a tatami mat. If it's geared as a tatami cutter, or like I said, Beiser said we want. They saw the croquet stick of doom as a challenge and said, like, I want you to take my sword and beat it into that metal rod. So there's sometimes requests, but generally speaking, if I get a sample, is basically considered my property on receipt, and whatever I do with it, they don't seem to care about.
I want to, when it comes to someone now, like if somebody lets me test it, I've got a lot of blades coming in from different. I had a guy ask me, a designer, a maker. He goes, "Man, how does this work?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, do you keep the knife? I said, "No, I'll do whatever you want me to do with it." I said, "I don't need," and at this point, I've got enough knives and stuff. Honestly, I prefer sending it back, testing it, sending it back, because I want to make sure what I do is on the up and up. That's what I want to make sure. Like I said, with the Work Tough gear, I'm just weird with stuff. I don't want anything with impropriety, and I'm sure everybody's got their opinion on it, and that's fine.
I felt the same way, Scab, that getting free stuff inherently makes me weird when the thing I'm trying to do is help, and I don't want people to, in the back of their mind, question, well, is he saying this because he's monetarily incentivized to do it?
That's me.
I hope that anyone watching my content is inherently skeptical about what I say. I try to be very abundant in my disclosures. So, but yeah, that it just makes me feel weird. So I try not to do it. What turned me around a little bit on it, and why now I will not break everything. One is time. And so it's not because I don't feel weird. It's because I don't have time to do it all. And two, it gives me the opportunity to make some content that is different and that people ask me about. Like I got asked the other day, can you compare a Messer and a Wakizashi? And I was like, I don't have any Wakizashi I can cut with. Like I don't have, like, I have antiques and I have stuff that's fancy I can't cut with, but I don't have anything that, like, I can kind of put through the paces. It wouldn't be bad to have an example around. So if somebody asks me a question, I have some sort of visual aid to make that content. So there's opportunities to do other stuff. And from the vendor perspective, there's opportunity for that thing to be shown more than once and to be talked about more than once. So I don't think they have any objection to me not breaking it and turning it into something. In fact, I'm honestly, I think most of the time people, it's just the subscriber count that allows me to get samples. I don't think vendors particularly like me breaking it. At least the minority of them, I think like it.
Well, I mean, they look at the amount of eyes that are going to be on your review, and they figure it'll be beneficial to them, as a piece of advertisement.
Well, they're not making swords to be bashed in the middle poles, right? No, they don't want people to do that. Yeah. And obviously, we've kind of talked ad nauseum about what the benefits are or aren't, but ultimately seeing their product fail is not necessarily pleasant. And two, there's a very strong possibility that it's going to fail prematurely or spectacularly, and it will be a wildly negative experience for them. So I don't think a lot of people really like that I break swords. Yeah. That's never been something somebody is, apart from Beiser and Quinn Waterfield, people have not asked me to please break the sword.
Like, I don't know how I would contribute. Go ahead, Skip. I'm sorry.
What I was going to say though is I had it's my bad. It's Keith, but it's My Bad Adventures is good friends with Anthony, Tactical Everyday Dad, and I've been able to test out a lot of his stuff, man. And Anthony actually messaged me last week. He said, "Hey, brother, you still have the Grizzler?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you have a car door you could stab with it? Because that's what I designed it for." And I said, "Well, let me look around."
Is that a normal thing in Florida?
Really?
Just an extra?
Yeah, he's like, I said, "Do you care?" He said, "No." I said, "Well," I texted him right back. I said, "Hey, man, listen, I don't have a car door." I said, "I've looked, but I've got a 55-gallon drum." He said, "Let's do it." I said, "All right." So there was, I think there are knife design, and he told me, he said straight up, he goes, "Man, I designed that thing to go through a car door." So I took it out back and I filmed it. And that's what I was going to get to. Everything I do with a knife, I do on film. As far as when a sample comes in. All right. He's like, like I had an experience with a maker not long ago. A knife broke, but I didn't feel like it was, I felt like it would do more harm than good to post the video. And we had a long talk about it. And this particular guy wasn't going to go with that vendor. I said, okay. I said, well, here's my thing. As long as you don't go with the vendor, I'm not going to show the video. But if you go with the vendor, I got to show the video because I got to be honest in my review, right? But getting back to Anthony, who's an awesome, awesome dude, he goes, man, I designed it for that. And the group that made it, I believe, my bad, help me out. Is it Hephaestus? Who was the weapons maker of the gods? Hephaestus?
Yeah, I have it. You know what? I have it written down on papers. I forgot exactly. It's Weapons of the Gods. I don't remember exactly how it's pronounced.
Okay.
Greek
In
name.
my opinion, those guys and Daniel Zugi have done some of the best, but he's like stabbed. So I went out there and stabbed a 55-gallon drum 7 or 8 times. He was ecstatic. It worked. It did what he designed. So I think in that, I don't think anybody's designing a katana to stab a car door other than zombie tools. But,
Yeah.
I think
So
some of it does
you
serve
brought
a
up
purpose.
something interesting there, Scab, about that particular dilemma, and it's a challenging thing to balance. Usually, what I'll tell folks is, if you send me something for public review, which is what most people send them for, or most vendors anyway, then that's my default, right? Like I'll assume you want me to put it on the internet, and you're sending it to me for free because publicity that you get in return. And I only talk about swords. I seldom talk about myself. So most people are interested in the subject. And even though the count is small, it's a pretty concentrated group of sword enthusiasts that are prospective buyers for that thing, right? So my default is I'm going to show the view. I'm going to show it publicly. If it goes bad, then I do tell vendors if there's a catastrophic failure, I'll do what a customer would do, which is tell you about it and then see what you do. But I'm going to still, like, that bad example is in. You can send another one and I'll include the results from that so that the customer can at least think, or prospective buyer, hey, there's some variability there, but if you don't want me to show it and you're just asking me for private feedback, I'll give that to you. I'm not going to spend as much time filming it. I'll give you some cell phone footage or something like that, but I'm not going to make it as much of a production because time. Right. And then I'll go test it and I'll give you feedback. And then I'm happy to do that in a non-public way, but you have to specifically disclose to me before I see anything in person that that's what it is. There's no backsies for you sent me a piece of garbage that you thought was good, and now you don't want me to show it because I told you it's bad.
Yeah.
Like if it fails catastrophic, but you sent it to me for public view, I'm happy to do either one, but you got to tell me which one it is and no backsies just because it didn't work out well.
Right. Well, and normally I'd have went that way, but we've talked at length. Me and this particular guy, he wasn't sure about him, so I'm like, and here's the thing.
You're in a prototype scenario though, right? So you make the call yourself. That's just the way I do. I don't necessarily know which one.
the other side is this. It happened to be a designer deciding on an OEM. So why? Because if I show that video, it's going to all go on the designer. And that is, so I'm like, you know what? And here's the deal. I got another one and the same shit happened. So to me, it's the maker, not the designer. And we had a conversation at length.
Yeah.
But getting back to tactical everyday dad, Scott brother, Daniel Zugi, Hephaestus, those guys are American made. And it goes back to what you said earlier too, Matthew, with the heat treat. Daniel Zugi does his heat treat in-house. I can't speak for Hephaestus, but it seems like some of these smaller guys that now there are certain people that say I get sent stuff because I'm nice, and that's probably true. But I also show you just like you do. See, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, because you actually called me on something that I've changed with the damn rubber hose test, because I would be like, oh, it's sailing through, and you're like, well, you're pulling it pretty damn hard. Remember that conversation, Matthew, you and I had?
I don't.
And so I've changed that because I'm like, okay, makes sense. The visual wasn't matching the audio. I also figured out that I was cutting the water hose wrong after a long tutorial from DJ Horn. It works a lot better, but the feedback there was invaluable. You know what I'm saying? But we show it. That's why I'm glad Joe's got into cutting and testing, and we show it. So, you know, as long as we show it, to me, we're good to go.
So this is a nuanced YouTube content creator problem, but do you find that you don't use knives like you might have when you were not a content creator, right? We're here because we're passionate about the subject matter, right? It's not for the money,
right?
Do you find that you basically stick to doing knife stuff on camera because otherwise it's missed opportunity for content?
Yes. Now, well, yeah, because today I had to use a knife at work and I filmed it to say, hey, look, I use a knife at work. So, but yeah, thinking about it, yeah. Now,
does it kind of rob you of some of the joy that you have in the hobby?
Some. Now, I'll tell you what I've done to remedy that, because I'm just one of those guys. I'm either all in or I'm all out. I can't half-ass do it. But one thing I've started doing, man, is I've got some go-to blades that everybody knows are my favorites, and like at least for an hour or two on the weekend, I'll go play in the woods with them that I don't film it. So I don't. But yeah, there's a lot of times, like today, my damn sandblast hose busted. I happen to have the knife I was reviewing, so I go get the camera. Yeah, I've never really thought about it like that, but yeah, there's a lot of times.
No, I've heard it from content creators kind of across the board that is just something that they have to deal with, where it's like, you know, and people, I'm a bit of a video game nerd as well. I play video games if I have time to do it. And the people that create content around it are like, yeah, I used to play for fun, but now it's a job. And if I play it, I always do it on camera, because otherwise like, I'm missing an opportunity to collect money for it or make content, which I'm otherwise going to have to deal with later. And I find that it's kind of the case with swords. Like there are times where I don't film it, but more often than not, the vast majority of the time I have a camera out. Whether or not I end up using the footage is a different story. Might not be in focus, or I might have forgot to turn the damn thing on or hit the record button. But the vast majority of the time, I'm trying to record
as much as possible. Yeah, as much footage as
possible. To go to my bad, he said he has to use it. Here's the thing: there are certain guys that I watch, and Terry's one of them, that because of their job, I know they use their knife. And to the comment section, let me clarify what I'm saying. When I say I'm a novice at best, it's terminology and certain things. So for me, it's easier to show you than tell you. Some of you guys, and there's a lot of content creators in the comments, are very articulate, and you know what you're talking about. And we know that by what you do for a living. Okay. So that's where I'm going there. That's not an argument about showing knives. I have to demonstrate knives until I get my base knowledge up to where I can have a sit down and talk. And that's kind of where that. And again, it goes back to people sending me stuff. And JR, I'm very thankful to you and to all you guys. But I'd rather everything I do. Now, there are certain knives after I've done the video, I'll go out and it bit me in the ass on one. I filmed one, did the review. It did awesome. I go out in the woods and I was clearing brush and I didn't know there was a damn piece of old fence there, and hit it. Bam. Straight to DJ Horn. I mean, so it's like, it's a catch-22 with some of it, you know, but that's my thing. Like Matthew, your base knowledge is up. Joe, your base knowledge is up. What I'm saying is, for me, demonstrating, plus it cuts down all the bullshit. Y'all have noticed that my videos have gone from 25 minutes to about 12. When I do my demonstrations and I cut myself off and I can narrate, because if I just sit there and talk, we'll be just like right here. Matthew's going, what the fuck are you talking? Because I'll ramble badly.
Oh, I definitely don't resemble that comment.
I don't think I've ever cut with a sword and not recorded it, because I have very few opportunities to cut. I mean, not to say, woe is me, but if I live near SCAB and I had that whole freaking swamp area to cut, I'll be there freaking every day. And I won't be recording it every day. I'll be doing it for fun, just because I enjoy having a sword in my hand, carrying it and cutting with it. But I'm at the point where now I try to find joy in cutting, but it's more like a job now, finding the time and finding the places where I can cut, living in New York, that it's it turned more into a job. I mean, it's still a hobby of mine. I love it, but it turned more into like, all right, I got to cut with the sword. Now I have to record it because I need the footage, whereas I can't just like go into my backyard and start swinging it around and practicing and cutting and doing some, shadow cuts and water cuts and stuff like that. I'm in a different scenario in terms of how I have to deal with it.
Yeah. My bad. Explain what you mean. The only bone I got to pick with you is going into the field with minimal gear. You mean me carrying minimal gear, or needing minimal gear? Explain that, and I'll try to answer. Because I nobody's coming to Arkansas. My bad. Good Lord. Now I'm gonna come see. I'm gonna come out there when the dogs play. We're gonna go to a game together. My thing is with this, and if it's that I don't carry enough gear, believe me, I was going to ask you this, Matt. When you're out, do you have a first aid kit nearby?
Mm-hmm.
I do too. I just don't show it. Joe,
I don't go.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm always nearby one.
When I talk about going out though, like I go to my backyard, and that's where I do the majority of my cutting. Or I go to a dojo, but the content I make isn't outdoor living kind of stuff. So I'm not in the woods kind of camping far away from things. But generally, if I'm out and about, like I have a first aid kit in my car. There's one not far from me. I usually when I cut with a sword also tell my wife, like, hey, check out, look if I'm laying on the ground in the backyard, and I try to wear stuff that's going to protect the vitals if something bounces back in a bad way. Yeah. But yeah, that's, I'm not going out into the woods and then, bringing equipment to film it. I'm just, walking a few feet out of my back porch area.
But my woods are right across the street. Okay. So what my bad's talking about is just for fun, minimal gear in the field. I've actually got something coming up with that, like a tarp. I went to that Blackie Thomas thing and learned a ton there. And I think the only way you can learn some of the stuff is to do it. But the reason I ask about the first aid kit is I damn near cut these 2 fingers off at work. And if it wasn't for a blood clot pack that I carry in the first day, I would have lost these 2. So I carry a clotter because shockingly I have heart problems. So I'm on blood thinners and all that. But I do carry a blood clot. I carry gauze. I carry all that. I try to have something close by, just in case.
Yeah, I don't. The just in case thing is a solid. I don't know that I have anything sufficient for a worst case scenario with what I'm playing with.
You've had a lot of close calls, man. I mean, I think that you're at the point though now where you kind of expect where the blade is going to kind of fly, and you kind of position your body in a certain way where you kind of anticipate, where the blade is going to kind of fly for the most part, I would say.
There's a couple things that I'm doing when I'm breaking it, right? And it's not consistent, but as a general rule, I'm not putting all my weight into it.
Right.
I'm putting as much weight as I can. I'm not going to be able to, if it flies back at me, I'm not quick enough to move.
Right.
So I'm putting as much weight as I can to not like accidentally slip and cut over my leg. And I have to stand in a weird position because I'm keeping basically my shoulder and my leg pointed at the target.
Yeah.
So that if it flies back, it's not flying right into my chest. I get a shoulder wound. It pokes me in the ribs. Maybe I puncture a lung, but it's not going into my heart.
Right. That's important.
Yeah,
that's important.
So I do those kind of things just to minimize the target area that something can fly back. But what what sword did I break? The Mitsudome katana, I want to say, flew in a way I didn't expect. It didn't go the way didn't go the direction I was thinking it was going. No, I could send it to Joe. And here, Joe, I'm gonna email you. How big is this thing? Can I share my screen on this? It's 22 megabytes.
I don't know. Do you have a share screen option there?
While they're figuring this out, my bad. I've kind of got us approval. If you want to do it this fall, me and you go over to Blackie Thomas for a few days. If you want to do that, camp on the lake and learn skills from Blackie. Let me know if you're down for that, and we'll get that going.
Bird, when you get better, I think as a commemorative for Bird coming back, I see it. I'm going to share it. I think we definitely got to hit Bird. Okay, when he's back to cutting again, we definitely got to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Add to stream. There we go. Go ahead.
And Charles Jones, the redneck nerd man, glad you're here. I don't think we've shouted you out. Good seeing you. Guys, thank y'all for sticking around, man.
I remember that one. Play that back again. That was great. Yeah.
So the important takeaway here is cut, fly back, and then shit, right? So like but you see how slow your reaction was after the blade already flew past you? Yeah. Right.
How fast it actually went towards your head and how your reaction was so much after it actually flew right by you. Boom.
Yeah,
so
it flew pretty
in the woods, you know?
Let's see if I can get it to where's the, no, it's still on. No, it's not. Where is, okay.
Boom.
So there's the sword, right?
And like, that's I don't crazy.
Know. And it moves pretty quick, but this is it next to my head, this little line right here. Now it ended up in the shed behind me, stuck in the roof. I had to pull it out.
The roof. Wow.
Yeah. So that was coming with some force, right? So takeaway here is that when I was cutting a piece of metal, I was trying to cut into a braced thing that kind of simulated armor. But because this piece moves,
yes,
it flung it back at my face. It would have cut and come down, but I didn't have it secured to the post. So the result was the helicopter of death flying right at my face. It looks like, looks phallic. But anyway, that's the
and those goggles definitely wouldn't have helped.
Yeah, those goggles are not saving anyone.
Nobody. Those things are not going to save your eyes, man.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, that is the craziest shit.
So that's the worst. That's the closest call that I've had, and
yeah.
I like looking at the video. It came closer than I thought it did when I heard it.
Good night, Dwayne. Thanks for stopping.
Good night, Dwayne.
But it came pretty close to my face. So now I don't directly cut down and lean over. I cut off to the side when I'm doing the braking stuff. I'm always a little nervous about cutting straight down because if it comes back, it's coming right back at my face. And if I'm cutting targets that move around, I know I have to be careful, and I don't do metal targets that aren't secured. That's why the croquet stick of doom is in the stand and mostly secured, is it doesn't throw things back at my face.
Right.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a positive. I'm a fan of having a face. So
yeah, because that could have got bad in a hurry.
Yeah, that could have been, there would have been way fewer sword reviews if that had landed.
Game over.
So there's been some close calls, Joe. You're right. The other thing I've armor is a thing, but it's a pain in the ass to put on. So I don't actually have anything that's like convenient. The thing I wear over my heart is actually a ringmail shirt, but I'm too fat to fit in it. So I just put it over and let it drape over my heart area because I can't. I fit in it, but let's just say it's funny. It looks a little bit like Play-Doh coming through the ringmail. That's so it's not great. It doesn't work for my wife, so I don't put that on fully anymore. And helmets, the fencing mask is hopefully going to deflect most things, but it's totally not a complete fail-safe. That sword, if it had gone straight at my face, would have punctured the fencing mask that I wear. Hopefully, it would
Yeah,
have slowed it down.
that's doing some, bro. There's not much stopping that.
No, it flew. This is in the middle of my backyard, and sometimes I have it, in shot, but it's probably 25 or 30 feet away is roughly where my shed is behind me, where I'm standing in the footage you saw. And so for the blade to fly past me and stick into the shed with enough force to like penetrate and be stuck there, it's coming at me at a good clip.
That would have been some serious damage. Yeah, that was crazy. But
yeah,
you don't cut like that anymore. So I think you kind of learn from it.
No, and there I'm still like, I'm not postured to avoid it. I can't avoid it when they break and kind of come back at me. I even when I expect it, I still can't avoid it. I was expecting I mentioned earlier a sword that broke at the hilt, and I got the second one, and I was like, I'm going to pretty much go right to the test that broke the first one. And I put on cut-proof gloves, and I kind of prepped a little bit, and I was expecting it to break. Didn't move out of the way in time. Still got whacked by the sword. Didn't get cut because I was prepared for it, but like it still came back at me, even though I was expecting it to break and being cautious. It still hit me. So
yeah. Sometimes the speed's just too much.
Well, I'm not. I'm not fast enough to do it. I'm old enough now where if I sneeze too hard, I'm sore for a while. I'm not a tough guy. I certainly have no false aspirations of super ninja-ness, and I just try to make a small target and protect the important stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I understand that. Well, boys.
Yeah, we're going to start closing this up.
Think?
We're going to start closing this up. But just to end it off in closing, my personal opinion, Matt, the question was when we first started, is there value?
It's S7, Joe.
Huh?
That's what I was going to ask.
You guys are never going to let me live this fucking shit down. I know that for a fact. So I guess I'll just get used to it. Okay. I honestly thought like thunder actually hit my fucking home when you were talking about it. I kind of lost track because I literally thought
if thunder hits your home, you'll be the first man in history.
But it was so freaking loud that I was like, well, you can't, and the house shake like an earthquake. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? So I'm like, there any holes like over my head or something like that? I don't know what's going on. But the point that we were making in the beginning is there value in pushing something to failure? And I honestly think there is value because there's so much you can learn from it. There's so much you can take from it. And if you're interested, let's just say like you had a couple people in the comments were saying, I only want to buy a sword that I know is going to cut through certain material. Or I only wanted to know if I'm only going to buy. I think Bird had mentioned it. He goes, the only swords that he likes to review and buy are swords that he knows are going to cut through bamboo because that's what he uses. So there's something to be learned by to see how much the sword can take to know, all right, that sword is for me or that sword is not for me. Or, I can see the difference between how this manufacturer approached their grain structure and their heat tempering, how well this held up with the same test compared to, sword A to sword B. So there is something that can be gained by it. I don't think it can definitely, a blanket statement could be put like if you bring something to failure, you don't respect the item that you're reviewing because it's purpose driven. There are people out there that don't respect their stuff, and their whole thing is just to have fun to see how much they can basically get away with and break. I mean, there's people of all kinds out there, but I mean putting a blanket statement as far as saying if you do this then you must be this type of person, I don't think that's right. But I do respect the people who are kind of get offended by it to say, you should respect the blade maker and you respect the blade and all that. I respect both sides of the fence, but I think honestly, we have to kind of just be neutral and say there's a certain reason why this is done in this fashion. So kudos to you, Matt. I think you're doing a great job to sum it all up. Basically a long answer, but
yeah. Joe, I appreciate where what you're saying. It's one of those things where I think you could totally make an argument that says, hey, breaking stuff is not a value to me. Right. I don't see how, with the resources that are available today, why you couldn't see how it's going to hold up by looking at this chart. The sacrifice of the craftsman's work was unnecessary. The sacrifice on the the altar of science was not necessary in this case, and there's little to be gained by me. But to say that it has no value universally is I think objectively false, and that's kind of where you can make statements yourself or for other learned people or have certainly an opinion on it, but when you for the folks that might say, hey, there's no value to be had whatsoever, period, there's no room in the argument then for the people that have said it's valuable. And it's not just people that are in the beginning stages. There's been people from a lot of different walks and interests and stages of the hobby that find some nuanced value in it. Is it going to be valuable every time? Arguable. But I can certainly point to a handful of examples where, people would have thought that this would have held up, and it was a shock that was only exposed by doing something aggressive. And I think in those cases in particular, it shows the value to the community in performing that kind of test, or usage. If you test as a scientific word that I'm cautious about using, and not testing, but you get what I'm saying.
Right.
And so I think you can totally have the opinion that it's not respectful to do it, and that you find it distasteful, but to then kind of try to say what's in somebody else's heart, or that a blanket statement that doesn't allow any room for anyone else's opinion, that's where it's tough to find a middle ground. Right.
But that's it. It's a middle ground, and it's just understanding what you're seeing and what you're saying, and that's what it comes down to. But I have respect for everybody's point of view, and everybody's point of view is important because that's their point of view, and everybody should be respected for it, but also not discounting really what the premise of what you're seeing here is. So that's really what it comes down to, But if you ask me if I can do it personally, I can't do it. I don't think I could bring myself to bringing a sword to failure, but that's just me. I just can't. Not because I don't think there's value in it. That's just me. That's just my constitution. And as far as, having a sword in my hand, I couldn't do it. Not that and that's why, thanks that we have Matthew Jensen around. That'll do it for us.
There's some, I don't know that you necessarily have to destroy them, right? But there's, I think certainly an argument that if you want to evaluate swords, right, a portion of swordsmanship is engaging with another sword, and there's only so much that you can take away from doing wooden swords or blunted swords and engaging cautiously, a sword versus another sword, seeing how it bites in and how that might change your technique is, just as a practitioner, something useful. Unfortunately, it also severely damages the blades. So I don't think you necessarily have to completely whack them into a steel pole with the intent of breaking them in half, but there's knowledge that you can take away from pushing them, if that knowledge is valuable.
Oh yeah, no, that I agree with. Yeah, like I would push my swords to see, like I said, I would try, different types of, and we had this conversation last night as far as trying to find a good cutting material to really test the strength of the sword. I agree with that 100%. That I can do. Yeah, it's a great topic,
It is a good topic. SCAB, what do you think? S7?
Here's what I was going to ask. If we're at the end of days in the zombie apocalypse.
One for the both of you.
Matt, what steel would you choose? And would you use a katana? Kongs and bases, what's up? I think that S7 would
what's up, Dynamo?
What I'd go with.
Chattanooga Chop, welcome, buddy. Kongs and bases, what's up?
I think we're right. Here's what I think. I think we're right back where we were. I think, and it goes to this. I've always been of the opinion to each his own. That's just me. People said that's a fence rider. Well, here's the deal. I've paid the price for having opinions on dumb shit. Some of it just ain't worth it. I think I would rather have each his own. And here's the beauty about YouTube and this great nation and all that. You don't watch it, don't fucking watch it.
We don't have to agree.
And I'm good with agreeing to disagree. I mean, I go back to this, and this is where I stand on it. A knife, sword, what to me is a tool. And if you buy that, or if maker says, I want you to break it, tell me the design flaw. Or if a designer calls you and says, hey man, stab a car door. It is what it is. That's just me, man. It's not waffling. I think the world of Joe X, but I got to a point with that axe, just slamming it. And I'm like, normal testing isn't going to do it. I'm out. That's it.
Right.
That's it. So that's where I'm at. Same place I've always been. It's yours. Do what you do. I think it all adds value. I really do. I think all of it adds value.
That's the it seems like, unfortunately, there's not a strong opinion on the opposite side, because that would be, it's tough for me to play devil's advocate in this case, given how invested I am in breaking things, right? Yeah. I've certainly been told over the years by a number of people that, like, hey, why would you break that perfectly good thing? And there's some very reasonable arguments about why it didn't present value in the particular context that I might have broken it in. I think where the challenge comes in this particular case is if the argument is made that holistically there is no value, and that you don't respect something because of breaking it, there's not any room, right? If you were to say in this case, or I don't, that's fine, but just period blanket statement, no value, you suck. There's not inherently, by disagreeing with it, there's no room. It's a black and white kind of statement that you're either for or against, which is unfortunate, because it's totally fun. There's totally been times where I don't, in retrospect, think I added a whole lot of value in breaking something. Initially, when I was making reviews, for example, I broke Ronin Dojo Pro katanas. They were one of the suppliers that sent me a few. Well, they're made out of the same steel and they're very similar shape. Like, what, a month later, breaking basically the same sword in a different set of clothes, what value did that really present? It was useful to me and perhaps entertaining, but like, I don't know that it necessarily informed the community at large. And there's a case to be made that, hey, that wasn't necessarily the best use of that particular sword. But when you state unequivocally that there is no further discussion, this is a useless activity, and you are bad or less than because of it, where do you go in an argument from there? And how is that helpful? Right. And it's fine to have your opinion. Right. Everyone gets their own opinion. It's perfectly fine. But when I say, like, hey, I understand your argument, there's room for discussion. And when you blanket say that you're just wrong, period, despite evidence, that
you've got a wall full of shit behind you that's yours, that's not broken.
I do, yes.
So you don't just go through breaking everything. I mean, that's the thing.
This is just the one Wednesday. So later I got to go break all that stuff yet.
But you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying.
I'm not in this. I can't be in the same conversation. We got to end this off. I can't really join in the conversation because, SCAB, you get a lot of stuff to review. Matt, you obviously get a lot of samples to review. I really don't get any samples to review. So if I did, I don't know how I would approach it.
You got the True Katana, though, right? Like you got some stuff from True Katana, and it sucked, and they sent you some more of their stuff.
No, True Katana. What they had, like, there was some kind of a more, I think it was a last Memorial Day sale, and they whatever it was, I got a couple of them because I wanted to just try it. I wanted to see what the whole hoopla was about. Obviously, it broke on me, and I wasn't happy with it, but they ended up giving me a full refund. So now, but I took that sword, I took one of the swords, and I actually gave it out for my 1,000 to the shredder that won it. So at least he's enjoying it, And I think the second one that I have that's broken, I'm going to try to maybe send it to Horn, see if he can fix it for me. And I might end up giving that away too. Maybe somebody finds some joy.
If it fails and kills somebody, Matt can say, see, you're right.
Well, that's
well, what I think about. The point is, Joe, that you basically got a free sword, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not free because it took your time and energy and all that kind of, like, it's not necessarily free, but you had an opportunity to not be out of pocket and break something, and you didn't. You're right. If given the chance, that's not your bag. That's fine.
That's not my bag. I just did the things that, I push it to the things that swords are supposed to do. But again, that's just me. But keep on doing what you're doing. As Danimal said it in the chat room, he loves it that you break swords.
Bird can fix it.
So he doesn't have to. So, so he doesn't have to. So that's basically the whole premise behind it. Let me break swords for you. So that's what it is. But gentlemen,
my feelings too. I like them.
Matt, thank you for joining us.
No problem, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you on. You're always welcome. Time is always our enemy, but that's my enemy. That's everybody's enemy.
That and the thunder hitting your house.
And the thunder hitting my house. Exactly. That's 7.
I'm thinking you meant lightning there because
lightning. Yeah.
Well, it was Thor.
Well, it was the thunder that I heard, and it's the lightning I was afraid of. That's it. That's basically, one and the other. But
thunder's his pimp.
Exactly.
He's knocking at the door.
Guys, thanks for joining us through 2-hour Blade Talk. And there are always going to be 2 hours when Matt's in the room. And
that's because somebody keeps re-asking questions.
Yeah. It's because you guys
could have wrapped this up about an hour.
You guys are the ones that brought it up about 5 times. I mean, it wasn't me. I just brought it up once. You just kept on going with it.
That's 7, Joe.
Yeah, that's 7. I don't think I'll ever remember. I don't think anybody in the chat room is ever going to forget S7 is the blade steel to go to. So I think we achieved.
My bad. Have a good night, buddy. Hey, my bad. When you get done with a blade show, I'll text you. Let's set that up with Blackie. Guys, thank y'all for being in here. If anybody didn't know, in a zombie apocalypse, Matt would use S7 because there is a high probability of that. So let's keep that. Joe, sing us out, buddy.
Thanks, guys, for joining us. We really appreciate it. It was a great Blade Talk, great discussion. S7 is basically the word of the show, and let's pick on poor old Joe, but it's all good. I can take it. I got rough skin. I love you guys anyway.
Rough skin.
Guys, thanks for joining us. It was a lot of fun. Had a ball. Matt, thanks for joining, and I'm going to sign this off. Have a good night, guys. Till the next Blade Talk. We'll see you soon. Don't forget about the Veterans Raffle, guys. June 10th, it's over. All right. Have a good night, guys. Night.
S7.